Hello, folks, and welcome to episode 1 of Teaching Marxism to Kyle Kulinski. So a lot of you know that I've watched Kyle Kulinski for a while. He was one of the people who helped get me into politics or bring me into the left, at least leftist economic theory. But obviously that has led me to Marxism. I've gone further left than Kyle. And one of my viewers recently told me that Kyle says that he's read Marxism and he was unimpressed, or he's read Marx and he was unimpressed. And I'm going to call baloney on that, Kyle. I'm going to call your bluff. But y'all know me. I'm not the type to say read theory or shut up. I'm the type to try and teach people Marxism and try and explain these theories to them. So that's what I'm going to do here with Kyle, because I notice a lot of things that he says and does are things that Marx and Engels critiqued. So we're going to see that here. He's talking about the U.S. Backing Saudi Arabia in the Middle East, you know, as the U.S. claims to care about freedom and democracy and all these things. They're actually supporting the Saudi genocide in Yemen, where they're starving people and bombing children's hospitals and the most horrendous crimes you can think of. And we're going to talk about what Marx and Engels said about these kind of critiques of capitalist nations not living up to the Enlightenment ideals of freedom, democracy, justice, and how Marx and Engels thought those ideals were essentially worthless if you don't understand the economic system, if you don't understand the mode of production, if you don't understand capitalism. There's no point in trying to live up to these ideals, because capitalism is a system that grows and exploits and leads to imperialism. So yeah, that's what we'll talk about, but let's play a short clip of Kyle here.
Saudi Arabia is on the UN Human Rights Panel, Human Rights Council, as they're creating the biggest humanitarian disaster on the planet today, as they're doing an embargo, as they're starving a country, as they're bombing civilians, open-air markets, mosques, schools. This is what they're doing. This is a sick joke. We're actively helping facilitate a genocide. Then they have the nerve to say, we need to work with them. Work with them. You should be working against them on the issue of Yemen. And the fact that you're not says everything I need to know about you. Because he even said previously, well, listen, we have a long-standing policy of, like, we don't sanction top heads of state or government officials who we have diplomatic relations with. Okay, do you understand that? I know that's a fancy way of talking, but all he's saying is our approach to international politics is like high school. If you're my friend, it doesn't matter if you do something disastrously wrong, incredibly fucked up, actively harmful, purposefully evil. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You're my friend, so it's okay when you do it. And it's okay when we do it. Do you understand that? That's what he's arguing. We don't sanction our allies. So then shut the fuck up about it. Oh, we care about freedom and democracy and human rights. You just admitted you don't. Because if you did, you would also have to hold your allies accountable. They don't care about human rights. They don't care about democracy. They don't care about freedom. They don't care about justice. We don't sanction our allies. Okay, so what about when your allies carry out a genocide?
So Kyle here is talking about the hypocrisy of the U.S.'s foreign policy in the Middle East, right? We talk about how much we care about human rights as we sanction and kill people in these countries like Iran. And outside of the Middle East, too, of course, we're killing people with sanctions in Venezuela, sponsoring Saudi Arabia's genocide in Yemen. You know, we sponsor the Israeli occupation of Palestine, while we claim to care about human rights and do things for democracy in the Middle East. And you hear Kyle say here, the U.S. doesn't care about freedom, justice, and democracy. And what are these ideals that Kyle is holding the U.S. to? Well, these are the ideals that are written into the Constitution, and these are ideals from the Enlightenment era, when the French Revolution was happening, the American Revolution even, later on. There were these thinkers like John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who promoted these ideas of freedom, justice, secularism. You know, Kyle's show is called Secular Talk. And they held up these lofty ideals, and they said we should use reason and be rational and implement the most rational, reasonable system that we can that allows the most people to flourish using these ideals of freedom, justice, and democracy. Now, you need to read this book, Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. It's real short, I promise, Kyle. It's not too hard. It's 60 to 80 pages. And in this book, Engels lays out that Marx said these Enlightenment thinkers, while they're good and while they are trying to improve society, and while Marx builds a lot of his analysis off the groundwork that was laid by the Enlightenment thinkers, where they fail is they don't understand the mode of production. They're not thinking like materialists. And a lot of these thinkers came at a time before capitalism, the current mode of production, was fully developed. It's really started to develop itself under Marx, and then even more under Lenin, and we've expanded on their analysis of capitalism since then. But Marx says that under capitalism, if you understand capitalism, the mode of production, you will understand that these ideals of freedom, justice, democracy especially, are not possible under capitalism. Because capitalism is a system that is in constant motion, constant flux, and constant growth. Growth of the capitalist class, and in constant crisis. And one of the functions of capitalism is to concentrate all the wealth and power into the hands of a few, the few people who own. This is what Marx and Engels were saying in the 1800s, and look at the capitalism we're dealing with today. Look at what the United States looks like today. Another thing that Marx and Engels said, that under capitalism, the capitalist class will always come to control the state, the government, and use the state and the government to suppress the proletarians, to suppress the working class, the working masses, the majority of society. What happens in the U.S. today? I mean, of course, I think Kyle knows this better than anyone. If you deny that the U.S. government, the U.S. state is run by the rich, you're crazy. You're just not paying attention to what's going on. Of course, it's run by the capitalist class. And this is something that Marx and Engels were saying in the 1800s. And they were critiquing these Enlightenment thinkers, or building off what they had to say, saying these ideals are great, right? These ideals of freedom, democracy, and justice are great, but you can't have these ideals until you overthrow capitalism, because the mode of production is based on exploitation, expansion, crisis, and concentrating wealth and power into the hands of the few, and using the state as a tool to suppress the working class so they can't change the mode of production by rising up. And the third aspect that I think Kyle is missing here is the analysis that Lenin had of imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. So after Marx and Engels died, capitalism continued to grow. Capitalism continued to change. And that was what Marx and Engels said was, we're analyzing capitalism, but this is our method, right? They have a method of looking at capitalism, looking at its contradictions in order to understand it. And you can use their method to analyze capitalism even after their death in the ways that it changes. This is what Lenin did with imperialism. He said at a certain point, finance capitalists, so bankers, big banks, and then big industry, productive industry, these industries like oil, who take stuff out of the ground, people labor on it, and then it gets sold at a market. They will monopolize and control all the industry at home, and then they will go abroad. They will expand their territory overseas, and they will try and suck up more resources, and then they will try and also sell stuff to the people overseas, expand their markets, access every market they can, and access all the natural resources that they can. And this is what U.S. foreign policy is all about, right? It doesn't matter what they say about democracy, freedom. Sure, you can point out that they're being hypocritical. Sure, you can point out that the Democratic Party isn't much better, or isn't any better than the Republican Party when it comes to foreign policy in the Middle East. But you need to understand that that's not going to change by electing politicians, right? Even if we got Bernie, it would have been better. He would have been able to help foreign policy be a little bit less evil. But essentially still, the U.S. state would still be run by finance capitalists. And now, since, the 50s and 60s, the military-industrial complex. We're making, weapons contractors who have been, who are in and out of the State Department all the time. The Secretary of State under Trump, all three of them were weapons contractors, are also deciding this foreign policy, right? So when you point out the hypocrisy, yeah, it's not bad, right, to say, well, the U.S. says they care about freedom and human rights, and that's why they're putting sanctions on Iran that kill people, and then they're sponsoring Saudi Arabia's genocide in Yemen. what the heck's that all about? It's about finance capital, right? All this stuff about democracy, freedom, justice. These are just lofty ideals, you know, that cannot be lived up to under capitalism, because the highest stage of capitalism is imperialism. And like I said, it's fine to point out that hypocrisy, but Kyle needs to bring it back to this is because of finance capital, right? Having a scientific understanding of the mode of production that we live under, capitalism, and how it works, how it expands, how it grows, and how it leads to imperialism. Yeah, and this was Marx's main critique that's laid out in Socialism, Utopia, and the Scientific, was that you can't just hold up these ideals without understanding materially the mode of production that you live under. What do humans do all day? We go to work, the vast majority of us, you know, while a handful of capitalists decide decide how production is carried out and decide how they're going to expand their capital. So you can't have freedom and democracy when this small group of people are essentially making all the decisions and they control the government. And now we have 150 years later, Kyle, who says he's unimpressed with Marx, you know, holding up these Enlightenment ideals to the Biden administration, saying, Joe Biden, you don't care about freedom, you don't care about democracy, you just protect our allies who protect our economic interests in the Middle East. While he's saying he's unimpressed with Marxism. Kyle, Marx and Lenin were critiquing this hundreds of years ago, or 150 years ago, about in Marx's case, about 100 years ago in Lenin's case, saying that this is how capitalism works. It monopolizes and it expands. These are the contradictions of capitalism, and only the overthrow of capitalism can change these things. And that's what we need to advocate for, rather than, you know, voting in people like AOC and Ilhan Omar. That's fine, you know, fight those battles, fight the political battles for sure, you know, and I campaigned hard for Bernie. But we need to understand that the only thing that's going to solve these issues of imperialism and the U.S. not living up to Enlightenment ideals is overthrowing capitalism. And no politician's going to do this. So Kyle, my message to you, if you're watching this somehow, thank you for making it through it. Read Marx and become a comrade. Comrade Kyle. We need you, buddy. Okay. See ya, everyone.